Well, I picked Colorado at the outset, and I know that wasn't going out on any sort of limb, but I like the Avs. I like a lot of the players. I like the way they play, and I guess I think it's their time. And yet, as I've watched this Tampa team, a ton of respect for them already with back-to-back Stanley Cups, but just the way that they're getting the job done now. When I look at this Tampa team, they beat the Leafs and the Panthers in the first 2 rounds. Those were the 2 highest scoring teams in the National Hockey League in the regular season. Oh yeah, the Rangers, Tampa, or the Rangers, Florida, and Toronto all had top 5 power plays in the National Hockey League in the regular season. Like, this is a ton of firepower, and Tampa is still standing and now shooting for a 3rd straight Stanley Cup. So we know about Andrei Vasilevsky, but I don't know that the hockey world's giving Tampa enough credit for just how stout they are defensively. And it's kind of funny because you still think of Kucherov and Stamkos and firepower. And if Braden Point gets back in there and it sounds like he's going to, you think of gunslingers and guys that can outscore other teams. And yet, in some ways, this Tampa organization has kind of morphed into the Los Angeles Kings when they were at the height of their Stanley Cups, where they just choked the life out of opponents. And you saw the way that they eliminated Toronto in a 2-1 hockey game. They shut out Florida in the elimination game. Even if it was a sweep, but still to punt Florida from the playoffs, shutout win for Tampa. And then the other night against the Rangers, another low event, low scoring, tight checking, and they come out on top. They know how to play that game now. So they've sort of morphed in the way that they play. And so you talk about this Colorado team that can score and all the dynamic offensive players. All of a sudden, they're running into this team now that just gives you nothing. So I have thought about this. I reconsider it. I'm going to stick with Colorado, but, not writing off Tampa at all. I guess I won't be surprised if Tampa's holding the cup for a 3rd straight time, but I am picking Colorado to win the trophy.
I would love to suggest that Darcy Kemper will rise up and outperform Andrei Vasilevsky. But sometimes in sport, it just follows script, and the better guy does win. Is that the one thing that could foil your plan here, that Vasilevsky just is the best goaltender by a mile here in this final?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, he has risen to the occasion, and those elimination game statistics are so ridiculously good, off the charts good. If he's in that position again, then look out. So they got to get to that point. And now Colorado's got home ice, and we'll see if they can take advantage of that. But Darcy Kemper, having been off for the last round in a little bit, not easy to throw yourself back into the heat of competition, particularly when it's just 2 teams that remain here. So, yeah, I give Tampa a wide edge in goal. I love the dynamicism of the Colorado defense, but when I look at Tampa and just what I mentioned, their group of defenders and the way they defend, maybe I lean slightly towards Tampa. And then up front, like Nathan McKinnon has waited. This is his stage now, and he's got company. But, it's his time to shine, and we'll see if he can. And obviously, the supporting cast there. I'm really curious to see what happens with a guy like Nazem Kadri, if he's able to get back into this series. It won't be at 100%, but they certainly will take him if he can suit up and play. So there's some great storylines, and both of these teams are fun to watch. And so, it's not a New York, it's not a Chicago, it's not a Los Angeles in terms of the massive metropolitan markets, but from a National Hockey League perspective, a team going for a 3-peat against this team that, just shows up on the highlight reels with McKinnon and Makar and all of the others that can do things, pretty special things out there on the ice as well. Like, it's a nice matchup. I think the league has to be pretty happy with the way things have played out here.
Yeah, there's some marvelous talent on the ice for sure. I'm like Jeff. I'm a conflicted Colorado picker, having picked the Avalanche to win the Stanley Cup at the outset of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So couple of levels of analysis that you can go down. One is via the players and the talent on each side. We'll do that in a second, or Jeff did some of that just now. But the other is the way you see the series going. And here's where I'm really struggling to pick Colorado. They're not going to sweep Tampa, right? Tampa's going to win at least one. Are they going to win in 5 games? That would be an awfully big ask to polish off Tampa in 5 games. So when you consider the possibility of a longer series, is Vasilevsky going to let them win the cup in his house in Game 6? I just can't see it. And then we're into a game 7 where
anything can happen.
It's Vasilevsky versus Kemper. So, yeah, I'm struggling with how many games Colorado would win it in if I'm still picking Colorado. But in terms of the players and the method to victory for Colorado, Jeff, I think it's those defense are going to have to jump up and be really, really active, right, and score a bunch of goals. That's got to be the way that Colorado wins this series. Is the defense get really, really aggressive and basically act in some cases like forwards and drive a lot of offense.
I was fascinated. I saw on ESPN.com that they had polled all of their staffers, broadcasters and writers, and asked them for a winner and how many games. And by a slight margin, more of them picked Tampa than Colorado. That wasn't what really intrigued me, though. It was a list of, I don't know, just off the top of my head, I want to say 20. And every single one of them picked 6 or 7. Like, there wasn't even one outlier that thought this would be a short series and was picking either team to win in 5. Like, every single person polled had their team winning, and it was either 6 or 7. So, yeah, I mean, I think consensus there is that this is going to be a deep series and that they are pretty evenly matched. And yeah, I mean, Cale Makar has been a difference maker, and so I could absolutely see him rising again. You know, he's so young, but everything that has been thrown his way, he has just eaten up in the National Hockey League and said, serve me up another challenge. Well, here you are on the grandest stage that the National Hockey League has to offer, and it won't surprise me if he wows us in a couple of these games and, you know, maybe even swings a game or two in Colorado's favor. I do expect that Nathan MacKinnon will have one of those nights where he's just hands down the best player on the ice, and there's nothing that Tampa can do about it because he's that good a player, and he has waited for this opportunity and has had a nice playoff run here. And then you look at that supporting cast, and Mikko Rantanen took a little while to get going, but he had a nice series in the last round. You know, and then they've got the supporting cast. I mean, JT Compher's had a nice playoff run, and Artturi Lehkonen scores the goal the other night, the overtime goal to push them through to the Stanley Cup Final. I think Colorado's depth ultimately, like, Tampa has shown, I mean, 2 straight cups, and here they are again knocking on the door. You know, what does, like, Patrick Maroon's got an incredible track record. You can't deny that, but Pierre-Edouard Bellemare and Corey Perry, like, these are veteran guys, and maybe some of their veteran savvy comes through, but they don't play with a ton of pace. If Colorado can keep the speed up, I think they've got a little more speed throughout their lineup, and we will see if that, you know, can have some impact on the outcome to help them get ahead. But goaltending is the great equalizer. We always talk about goaltending and special teams. I think both of these teams can deliver on the special teams side of things. But yeah, maybe when all is said and done, it's just going to be the story that Andrei Vasilevsky is that good. And I see a lot of chatter out there in hockey circles now. People are, you know, they're lumping him in with Dominic Hasek and Patrick Waugh and Marty Brodeur. And he's only 28. Like, it's conceivable that Tampa could go through a complete rebuild, save for their goaltender, and come out on the other side, and he's going to have another run at some point here where he'll have a chance to add to his legend and his legacy. So, you know, I look at this Tampa team, guys, and somebody had this on Twitter the other day. Since 2015, Tampa's played 129 playoff games and won 82 of them. And by comparison, the Canucks have played 23 playoff games in that time and have won a dozen. And the one year that Tampa missed the playoffs since getting to the final in 2015, which they didn't win, but they got to the Stanley Cup Final in 2015, the one year that they missed the playoffs, they were a 94-point team and fell just short. So this really is an incredible run for an organization that just seems like it's so well, you know, from the ownership on down. And they've switched general managers, obviously, in that time. And I think, too, that some people forget Tampa was 1 win, 1 goal away from making the Stanley Cup Final in 2011. And remember all the talk that, you know, stylistically, the Canucks would have matched up way better against a Tampa team than the Boston Bruins, who ended up winning Game 7 of that Eastern Conference Final 1-0. So we can play the woulda, coulda, shoulda game, but, you know, had they scored 1 more goal, perhaps back in 2011, it could have been Stanley Cup Final appearances in 2011, 2015, 2020, 2021, and now 2022. So they have been the team of the decade. The baton was passed from the Chicago Blackhawks, who obviously were an era of excellence in their own right. But there's no doubt that the last 6 or 8 years, the Tampa Lightning have been the model franchise in the National Hockey League.
Just think about the extra games played for Lightning players versus Coyotes players. Think of how many more games they have played than the other guy. You mentioned...
Incidentally, Stamkos Hedman played in that game. Yes. So did Matthias Oland.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Our old friend.
McKinnon had a nice playoff.
Just to your point, Arizona actually, remember they had a little bit of bubble success. Buffalo is the team. Buffalo's the team that you want to point to, right? Like it's been a decade without a playoff appearance for the Buffalo Sabres.
Nathan McKinnon had a nice playoff run, as you said. Nice. 18 points. Surprisingly, though, he's not the top scorer on his team. Makar's 4 points clear of him. And it might be Makar and Kucherov for the scoring title. Might be. Or maybe McDavid wins the playoff scoring title, having only played 3 or 4. I think we're in agreement, guys. You have to play in the final at least to win the Conn Smythe, don't you? I think you have to at least play in the final. But who's going to win the scoring title? Is it going to be McDavid, or can one of these players, Kucherov or Makar, have a good enough playoff to get? I mean, it requires 10 points for Kucherov to tie McDavid. 11. That's a nice series for a player.
That's a fascinating question. We've seen players on the losing team in the Stanley Cup Final. Ron Hextall and J.S. Jaguar, the year that the Ducks got to the final way back when. But like, how far ahead would McDavid have had to have been through 3 rounds in the scoring race to be a legit, or could he? I'm kind of with you. I think your team has to get to the Stanley Cup Final. And that's not to discount anything that Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl did. I mean, they were spectacular. But if they had pushed Colorado a little further and had a few more games to rack up points themselves, well, the Avs players would have had those extra games too. And so in theory, they probably would have picked up a few more points too. And so maybe Cale Makar would have kept pace with a guy like Connor McDavid. But I think you're looking at those two, I would imagine, jump out. But then it comes back to Vasilevsky. If he has another strong series here, then I think you just have to look at him and his playoff numbers. And I know, the Rangers got to him early on, and that's something that Colorado probably looks to and says, hey, this guy is fallible. Like, it's not every single game that he's going to lock you down and shut you out. But on balance, and more often than not, he can be a difference maker for the Tampa Lightning, just the way that they play right now. I'm expecting big things from Nathan McKinnon, but right now I would have to think that Cale Makar probably has a slight edge on him, even on his own team, in terms of the push for the playoff MVP. So, it's another storyline to watch in this series, because I do think that that trophy is very much up for grabs, as is the big one, the Stanley Cup.